There is a story everyone knows about how Netflix began. Reed Hastings rents Apollo 13 from Blockbuster, forgets to return it, and gets hit with a $40 late fee. Humiliated and angry, he decides to build a company that will never charge a late fee again. It is a perfect story. It is also, by Hastings' own later admission, mostly a myth. A tidy origin he told because the truth was harder to explain. The real beginning is quieter and stranger. In 1997, Hastings was a software engineer who had just sold his first company for $700 million. He was looking for the next thing. He had heard about a new format called the DVD, a movie pressed onto a disc thin enough to slide into an envelope. So he ran an experiment. He bought a music CD, mailed it to his own house in Santa Cruz, and waited. When it arrived a day later, unbroken, he understood something that the largest video rental chain on earth did not. The entire business of renting movies was about to leave the store. This is the story of how Netflix used that insight to destroy Blockbuster, and then spent the next 25 years almost destroying itself. On paper, the idea was absurd. Hastings and his co-founder Mark Randolph were going to mail fragile discs across the country and trust the United States Postal Service to deliver them, both ways, without losing or shattering them. When Netflix launched in 1998, it worked the obvious way first: pay per rental, just like a store, but by mail. It barely grew. People already had a video store down the street. Why wait 2 days for the same thing? So they killed their own model. In 1999, Netflix dropped per rental fees entirely and introduced a flat monthly subscription. No due dates, no late fees, no return deadline. Keep 3 discs as long as you want. Mail one back, the next one ships. It was the first time renting a movie felt like a service instead of a transaction. The red envelope became the product. Subscribers climbed past 300,000. But Netflix was burning cash, the dot-com bubble was inflating, and a much larger predator had finally noticed the small company nibbling at its edges. If you're enjoying this, take a second to subscribe. We tell the real story behind a new build every few days. Because what happened next was the single most expensive mistake in the history of the video rental business. In the year 2000, the dot-com crash was wiping out internet companies by the week. Netflix was losing money on every subscriber and needed a lifeline. So Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph got on a plane to Dallas, to the headquarters of Blockbuster, a company with 9,000 stores, $6 billion in revenue, and a customer in nearly every town in America. They walked into the office of CEO John Antioco with a proposal. Let Blockbuster buy Netflix. Run it as the online arm of the brand. The price they wanted was $50 million. According to people in the room, the Blockbuster executive struggled not to laugh. $50 million. For a tiny mail-order company that lost money on every order, in a business Blockbuster already dominated, they passed. Hastings and Randolph flew home empty-handed. It is, in hindsight, one of the most catastrophic decisions in corporate history. The company they laughed out of the room would, within a decade, drive Blockbuster into bankruptcy and liquidation, until a single store in Bend, Oregon remained as a kind of museum. But here's the part the legend leaves out. On the day Blockbuster said no, Netflix was not the inevitable winner. It was a wounded startup, out of options, about to walk straight into the worst year of its life. By 2001, the bottom had fallen out of the internet economy. Netflix had filed to go public and then withdrew the filing. No investor wanted a money-losing .com. The company laid off a third of its staff. Hastings later admitted there were mornings he was not sure they would make payroll. Mark Randolph stepped back from running the company, leaving Hastings in command of a business that was bleeding cash with no clear path to profit. And yet underneath the panic, something was working. Every month more subscribers signed up than canceled. DVD players were getting cheaper, landing in millions of living rooms. The flat fee model meant predictable, recurring revenue, the kind investors eventually fall in love with. Netflix held on long enough for the market to thaw. In May of 2002, it finally went public, raising just over $80 million at $15 a share. It was a modest debut, but survival in that climate was the victory. Netflix had walked through the .com graveyard and come out the other side with a public listing and 1 million subscribers. The problem was that its survival had now made it visible, and the giant in Dallas had finally decided to stop laughing. In 2004, Blockbuster finally moved. It launched Blockbuster Online, a near-exact copy of Netflix. DVDs by mail, monthly subscription, no late fees. And Blockbuster had 2 weapons Netflix could not match: 9,000 physical stores and far deeper pockets. Then it played its trump card, a program called Total Access. Get your DVDs by mail, then walk into any Blockbuster store and swap them for a free in-store rental on the spot. Mail and retail fused. It was genuinely brilliant, and it was working. Blockbuster Online added subscribers faster than Netflix. To compete, both companies slashed prices in a brutal race to the bottom, torching their own margins. Netflix's stock sank. Analysts started writing its obituary. For the first time, the company that had survived the crash looked like it might actually lose. And then Netflix caught a break that had nothing to do with strategy. Blockbuster was carrying heavy debt, and a corporate raider named Carl Icahn had taken a stake and was fighting the board. In the middle of the war with Netflix, Blockbuster fired the CEO who had championed total access and gutted the program to save money. They had Netflix on the ropes, and they let go. Netflix exhaled, but Hastings had already seen the next threat, and it was coming for the disc itself. While Blockbuster fought with mail and stores, Netflix had quietly built something harder to copy. A machine that learned what you wanted before you knew yourself. It was called Cinematch, a recommendation engine that studied the ratings of millions of subscribers and used them to predict which films you would love. This mattered more than it sounds. Netflix could not afford to stock 1,000 copies of the latest blockbuster the way a store did. So instead, it learned to steer demand toward its enormous back catalog. Older films, indie titles, documentaries, the long tail that stores ignored. A satisfied subscriber who kept finding things to watch was a subscriber who never canceled. The engine was the moat. In 2006, Netflix made a bet that revealed how much it cared. It announced the Netflix Prize, $1 million to any team in the world that could improve Cinematch's accuracy by 10%. Thousands of researchers competed for 3 years. The contest poured rocket fuel into the science of recommendation, and it told the world exactly where Netflix believed the future lay. Not in discs, not in stores, in data. Because Hastings had named the company Netflix, not Mailflix, for a reason. From the very beginning, the plan had always been to escape the envelope entirely. In January of 2007, Netflix did the most dangerous thing a successful company can do. It started competing with itself. The DVD business was finally profitable, growing, beloved, and Hastings launched a feature designed to make it obsolete. It was called Watch Instantly. Streaming. At first it was tiny. 1,000 titles, only on a web browser, only for subscribers who already paid for discs. It threw in a handful of streaming hours for free, almost as a curiosity. But the intent was total. Hastings had watched broadband speeds climb and understood that within a decade, mailing a physical disc would look as quaint as a telegram. Rather than let some future startup do to Netflix what Netflix had done to Blockbuster, he resolved to do it to himself first. Over the next few years, Netflix raced to put streaming on everything: the Xbox, the PlayStation, the Wii, then a small device that became the Roku, then every smart television on Earth. The catalog grew, the experience got better, and subscribers began, slowly, to shift their habits from the mailbox to the screen. It was working beautifully, which is why what Hastings did next remains one of the most baffling self-inflicted wounds in business history. In the summer of 2011, Netflix was a Wall Street darling, the stock near $300, 25 million subscribers. Then, in July, it sent an email that detonated all of it. For years, subscribers had paid one price, around $10 a month, for DVDs and streaming together. Netflix announced it was splitting them into 2 separate plans. If you wanted both, your bill jumped 60% overnight. The backlash was instant and ferocious. Hundreds of thousands of furious comments, cancellation threats by the tens of thousands. And instead of retreating, Hastings doubled down. In September, he posted a video announcing that the DVD business would be spun off into a separate company, with a separate website and a separate name. He called it Qwikster. Now customers would need 2 accounts, 2 queues, 2 bills, to get what they used to get in one. It was, in Hastings' own later words, a catastrophe of arrogance. He had been so focused on the streaming future that he forgot the customers living in the present. Over a single quarter, Netflix lost 800,000 subscribers. The stock collapsed from around $300 to under $70, a wipeout of more than 75%. The company that survived the dot-com crash had nearly killed itself with a press release. To his credit, Hastings did something most chief executives never do. He admitted he was wrong, fast and in public. 3 weeks after announcing Qwikster, he killed it. The DVD and streaming services would stay under one roof, one website, one account. The price increase, however, stayed. Hastings wrote an apology that began by saying he had messed up, and he meant it. For months, the company looked mortally wounded. Subscribers kept leaving. The press declared the Netflix story over. But beneath the wreckage, the underlying logic had not changed. Streaming was still the future. Broadband was still spreading, and the customers who stayed were quietly watching more than ever. Hastings had made a brutal, unforced error, but he had not been wrong about where the world was going, only about how roughly to drag people there. Slowly, the subscriber numbers stabilized, then began to climb again. The stock, which had cratered below $70, would within a few years pass its old highs and keep going. The Qwikster disaster taught Netflix a permanent lesson. You can cannibalize your own business, but you cannot insult your own customers. And as the company healed, Hastings was already preparing the boldest bet of all, one that would turn a movie rental service into a Hollywood studio. In 2011, even as Qwikster burned, Netflix made a decision that would change television forever. It bid for a political drama called House of Cards, and it did something no network would do. It committed to 2 full seasons, 26 episodes, before a single frame was shot, for around $100 million. Networks make a pilot, test it, and only then decide. Netflix skipped all of it. Why? Because of the machine. The data told Hastings that a huge slice of subscribers loved the director David Fincher, loved the actor Kevin Spacey, and loved the original British version of the show. The overlap of those 3 audiences was enormous. Netflix was not gambling, it was reading its own viewers. When House of Cards launched in 2013, Netflix released the entire season at once, inventing the modern binge. It became the first online-only series to win major Emmy nominations. The message to Hollywood was unmistakable. The mail-order DVD company was now a studio, and it had better information about what people wanted to watch than the studios did. Over the next few years, Netflix would pour billions into original films and series, from Stranger Things to global hits in dozens of languages. It had escaped the envelope completely. Now it wanted the entire planet. In January of 2016, Reed Hastings stood on a stage in Las Vegas and made an announcement that stunned even his own industry. Netflix, he said, was now available in 130 new countries, effective immediately. In a single day, the service went from a few dozen markets to nearly every nation on Earth, all at once. No company had ever attempted a global launch on that scale. The logistics were staggering. Payment systems, languages, local regulations, content rights, and internet infrastructure that varied wildly from country to country. Netflix had spent years quietly building the technical backbone to make it possible, a streaming system that could adapt to a slow connection in rural India or a fiber line in Seoul. The bet was civilizational in scale. Hastings believed that the way humanity watched television was collapsing into a single global model, on-demand, internet-delivered, personalized, and he wanted Netflix to own that model everywhere before anyone else woke up to it. For a while, it looked invincible. Subscribers crossed 100 million, then 150. The stock soared into the hundreds of dollars, but that breakneck global expansion had been fueled by something that would eventually come due: mountains of borrowed money and an ever-rising bill for content. To feed a global audience, Netflix needed an endless supply of new content, and it could no longer simply license other people's films, because those companies were waking up. Disney, Warner, and others began pulling their movies and shows to build streaming services of their own. So Netflix did the only thing it could. It spent. By the end of the decade, the company was committing more than $15 billion a year to content, much of it financed by issuing debt. The logic was relentless. More shows meant more subscribers meant more revenue justified more shows. As long as the subscriber count kept climbing, Wall Street happily ignored the fact that Netflix was burning billions in cash and piling up obligations. It was a machine that only worked while it was growing. And then, in 2020, the pandemic poured fuel on the fire. Lockdown households around the world signed up in record numbers. Netflix added more subscribers in a single year than it ever had. The stock hit an all-time high above $700. Hastings looked once again untouchable, but the pandemic surge had pulled forward years of growth into a few months. The well of new subscribers was running dry, and almost no one inside the company saw how close the edge really was. In April of 2022, Netflix reported something it had not reported in more than a decade. It had lost subscribers, 200,000 of them in a single quarter, and it warned that 2 million more would vanish in the next. The pandemic boom had reversed. Growth had stalled. Password sharing, which Netflix had tolerated for years, meant an estimated 100 million households were watching without paying. And new rivals were finally everywhere. Wall Street's reaction was apocalyptic. In a single day, Netflix stock fell 35%. Over the first half of the year, it lost roughly 70% of its value, hundreds of billions of dollars in market capitalization. Gone. The company laid off hundreds of employees. The narrative flipped overnight from invincible disruptor to bloated has-been. A cautionary tale about a company that had spent too much chasing growth that was never coming back. For the third time in its life, Netflix was being written off for dead. Reed Hastings, who had been so right about the future for so long, was suddenly the man who had missed the turn. But Netflix had survived the dot-com crash and survived Qwikster by doing one consistent thing: refusing to defend the present at the cost of the future. And it was about to do it again. Netflix's response to the collapse was, once again, to break its own rules. For its entire history, it had run a single sacred promise: no advertising, ever. Hastings had said it for years. In 2022, he reversed it. Netflix launched a cheaper subscription tier supported by ads, opening a whole new river of revenue. Then it went after the 100 million households watching for free. The company that had built its brand on being generous about password sharing began cracking down hard, requiring extra payment for viewers outside your home. Industry watchers predicted a backlash worse than Qwikster: mass cancellations, fury, collapse. The opposite happened. Millions of freeloaders converted into paying subscribers or signed up for the cheap ad tier. In a single quarter in 2023, Netflix added nearly 9 million subscribers. The ad business grew fast, and crucially, the company finally stopped burning cash. It turned strongly profitable, generating billions in free cash flow for the first time. The stock, left for dead near $170, climbed back over the following years to new record highs. Subscribers passed 280 million. The cautionary tale had become again the most valuable name in entertainment. Reed Hastings stepped back from the CEO role, handing off a company he had brought back from the brink 3 separate times. Step back, and the pattern is almost unnerving. Netflix killed the video store with a red envelope. Then it killed the red envelope with streaming. Then it killed its own no original content rule, its own no advertising rule, and its own tolerance for password sharing. Every time, abandoning a thing that was working in order to survive the thing that was coming. Most companies died because they protect their best business too long. Blockbuster had 9,000 stores and a chance to buy Netflix for $50 million, and it could not imagine a world without the stores, so it defended them all the way into bankruptcy. Netflix did the opposite. It treated its own success as temporary, something to be dismantled before a competitor could do it first. That instinct nearly destroyed the company twice. Qwikster and the 2022 collapse were both wounds it inflicted on itself by moving too hard, too fast. But it is also the only reason Netflix is still here while the store that laughed at it is a single museum in Oregon. The lesson is not that disruption is easy. It is that survival sometimes means having the nerve to break the very thing everyone tells you to protect. Reed Hastings tested that nerve more often than almost anyone in business, and built, from a single disc mailed across town, an empire that reshaped how the world watches everything. If a story about betting against your own success is the kind you want more of, subscribe.